Hey guys, some gamer dude here. I reviewed the Final Fantasy TCG many moons ago, much closer to when it was released. I'm not totally happy with that review in retrospect, as it's like many reviews I see on YouTube for games, an outline of the game and whether I liked it or not, but not why I came to the conclusion that I did. I originally gave Final Fantasy a 3/5, a meh. Perfectly fine, didn't do anything to stand out, and didn't say anything more specific than that. I recently touched the game for the first time in years, and would like to take the opportunity to review the game for a second time. The Final Fantasy TCG, published by Square Enix, is a game with the goal of getting your favourite Final Fantasy characters to interact in a card game. The version we play being the second version of the TCG. The game originally being released in Japan in 2012, continuing till 2016, where the original edition was cancelled in favour of a reboot that went international. Before we get into the game itself, the card template is worth discussing. The core game has 3 card types, with a 4th being introduced in later sets. I want to focus on the main 3. These are forwards, your main attackers, backups, the game's secondary resource system, and summons, the game's spells. The system is meant to replicate the front and back rows of the older Final Fantasy games, wherein the back row takes less damage but needs specific weapons or spells to deal decent damage. The problem is, on a cursory glance, all the cards look pretty much the same. The main difference between the cards are that the name bars are slightly different, as is the card type on the middle left, and that forwards have a power value. While this becomes a complete non-issue after you familiarise yourself with the cards, I had trouble with the person I was playing with making mistakes at times because the cards are so very similar in appearance. This was exacerbated by 2 key points. The first being that the art on the forwards and the backups is very similar in theme. They pretty much look the same, just a character. Even some of the summons, such as 13 Shiva, fall into this. The second is that the card type icon is very small and hard to read, with small, thin text. They are color coded and that helps, but it's not inherently noticeable. It's not big or flashy, neither is the game they come from, which does interact with many cards. More focus is put on their class, which is centered and bolded. As I said, it does sink in once you familiarise yourself with the cards in the game, but it is worth commenting on. While we're on the topic of the visuals of the cards, the art is very divisive, being key art, concept art, or screen caps from games. A frequent comment about the game is that the art is very unappealing to look at and lazy. I am neither here nor there. I feel the game looks fine, but it is a complaint thrown around a lot. Even from people that have played games using screen caps from television shows and key art, this complaint still comes. I believe it's from the fact that the cards have so much white they look bare. This causes the art to stand out more and consequently gain more scrutiny than they would otherwise. This is more of a stylistic choice, harkening back to the Japanese Final Fantasy boxes, which were white with plain black text. Even the cards that have backgrounds due to being screen caps caught the ire of those complaints for being lazy. So I say this in the game's defense. Art is very expensive, surprisingly the most expensive aspect of the game. By reusing assets, they can keep producing the game as the profit margins necessary to keep the game going are lower. It's actually something of a positive, and why games like Chrono Clash do the same. So let's get into the gameplay. While Final Fantasy has a fairly unique resource system and a couple of really cool quirks, it's nothing we haven't seen before, bearing the closest similarities to Duel Masters. But what else is new? Everyone seems to copy Duel Masters, but we don't have Duel Masters. Final Fantasy's main claim to individuality is its draw and CP systems. In Final Fantasy, you start with a 5-card hand. Starting player draws a card, and from there both players draw 2 cards. This is mostly to interact with the resource system, but I do like that it allows you to see a ton of your deck in any given game. I really like that actually. While this is a consequence of the CP system, I would like to see how this draw 2 would interact with other games that use resources from the hand like Final Fantasy does. The Crystal Points, or CP system, is rather interesting. Instead of playing resources directly, you discard cards and tap backups to play cards. Each discarded card providing 2 resources and backup providing 1 resource. You must provide at least 1 resource of the same colour as the card you are trying to cast. Since all forwards have fairly close power levels in terms of raw numbers, it's not so much of an issue to see someone pitch 2 for a 4-drop, though the more standard opening play is to play a 2-cost backup to correct payments and minimise resource costs. I like aspects of the CP system. You can play what you want most of the time. You get 4 CP a turn in raw draw, but there is a tangible cost for doing so. I like this. Unlike, say, Dark Ritual from Magic, the cost is actually fair for what you are getting on board in presence and effects. The problems I have with it are more to do with deck construction and other aspects of the game. The game has three things in place that make the CP system a rather hard decision-making process, despite the draw step. Cards are limit 3. Some cards have S abilities that cost an additional card of the same character, and the game uses Vanguard's damage system, losing access to cards as you take damage. On that quickly, I don't think it copied Vanguard. They both came out the same year originally. I believe it'd be like what we're seeing now with cards that start in play dictating the colours of your deck. Parallel evolution. But all of these, along with the idea of having key cards you want in play that might get broken, this game's term for destroyed, combine to make discarding cards at times a really hard decision. There are and will be times you will sit there looking at your hand and thinking to yourself,
"Oh shit, what are we gonna do now?"
this isn't even going into the colour issues, having only disposable cards and backups of one colour but needing to cast another, or not having the total of the colour you need to do what you want. While I appreciate what the resource system is trying to achieve, I don't think it was executed particularly well. It feels clunky and at times frustrating. The gameplay of Final Fantasy is fairly standard fare. Draw phase, main phase where you cast things, a battle phase where your forwards attack one by one, a secondary main phase, and finally the end phase. All summons have instant speed, forwards have summoning sickness, backups come in tapped, forwards only have one value that is both their power and life. Once you deal 7 damage to your opponent, you win, and some cards are cast immediately without cost if they are placed in the damage zone. It's pretty much Duel Masters with Vanguard's damage system, but with 7 life instead of 6. There are a few little quirks though. Firstly, unless cards have this icon, they have legendary, meaning you can only have one out, which keeps the board from getting very large. I like this because it makes each forward and backup feel like their own entity. It casts more importance upon them. It adds flavour to the game. Secondly, you are hard locked at a maximum of 5 backups, meaning you usually have to pitch cards. Thirdly, we have the S effect system, wherein you can discard a card with the same name to use the ability, which is an interesting mechanic itself and I quite like it. It does feel like a side effect of Legendary on everything, give access to stronger abilities, and it does really feel like Vanguard's Persona Blast. It's adjacent to it, but I like it. Fourth, we have the party attack system, wherein you can send out forwards together to overcome a larger forward, and if the opponent chooses to block, you can allocate damage however you like. I quite like this system. It's risk and reward, but doesn't cause a big forward to become too overpowering. Though I wish the party system could be done in reverse, on the defense. The biggest quirk I noticed is something not in the game. There doesn't seem to be a keyword that causes more than one damage to be dealt. There is no damage accelerant. Forwards can only attack once per battle phase period, so if they return to their original orientation, you can't tap to attack again. This, along with the fact boards are fairly contained, causes some games to go really slowly. You wouldn't expect that with the CP system allowing you to bring out big cards so easily, but the game is sluggish, and as a result, kinda boring. I don't mind slower paced games. I actually quite dislike games that go too quickly. But this is the inverse of that. It goes on far too long. It doesn't feel tit for tat. It just feels like nothing is happening. I don't know if this is something that is no longer an issue with later releases, but it's a turn off. More so than the CP system too. Boredom set in rather quickly. Back in my original review, I was rather apathetic towards Final Fantasy. I had no strong feelings. Recently, I questioned if I was too harsh, given its similarities to Duel Masters and my longing for Duel Masters. But I'm glad I got the opportunity to play it again. I can now articulate why it didn't click with me. While it has many aspects I really like, particularly the legendary on forwards, the S abilities, favourable card interactions and party attack system, the game doesn't feel good to me. It's clunky and tedious. While I could understand liking it and having fun with it, it's not for me. It wasn't for my friend either. He expressed very similar sentiments to myself. Recently, I theorized that Final Fantasy 13 and 15, along with Dragon Ball Super, caused this game to flounder. Now I'm not so sure. While I do think they had major contributions to the lack of large success of Final Fantasy, the game itself is not doing any favours either. It's far from the worst game I've ever played, but not one I'd choose to try again. I feel good that I gave it a second look and a second review, but this will be the final look. This has been Some Gamer Dude, and thanks for watching.